It's
Mhm.
cool.
I just pressed record on my end, so I don't know if it's showing record on your end.
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
So
Okay.
like a little, there's a red light and it says
Yeah.
recording.
Can and can you see if you can record?
Oh, let me
Because I
see.
know you were trying to see, but I didn't see anything come up on my end.
Record on this computer. Please request recording permission from the meeting host. So that's okay, as long as you're recording
I'm not seeing anything
it.
coming
No, right now
through.
it's coming out. Maybe it's an email or whatever. Who knows?
Hold on, because what? Maybe it's in a chat.
Oh, no,
No.
no, it's not. No.
I guess the beauty of Zoom, I'm not seeing anything, literally nothing is popping up on my computer that says request to record. I just hope it records. If it doesn't, then there's a video of practice run.
It is the beauty of practice. And hold on. This is a good time for me to try it and see which shirt color, because I got blue. Blue is the color for me and red and all that. But you see, this one looks a little washed out, right? It doesn't matter, I guess.
I like both.
And then
I
I've
like
got the
both.
darker blue.
Yes.
Like this, maybe this is a better color.
Ooh, and we could be both blue.
Oh yeah. I was thinking like the other day, I was like, oh, because based on the YouTube training or whatever,
Yeah.
you said to wear a dress shirt.
To wear a dress shirt. I figured I'm
Or
just
a
gonna
suit
wear.
that you can, for guys, something that's very quick that you can.
And I like the
Uh,
way we could do it now. It's just I could be wearing my underwear.
I know,
And I
really.
could just put on a shirt.
I could be having boxer briefs on right now.
Yeah. I think a lot of anchors were doing that because I
Oh
remember
yeah,
seeing like the
you're
videos,
joking.
right? Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about our session today about the significance of connection. Uh, what has been on my mind last week, right? Interesting, is I had a client who wants to return to the office, and she said to me, Brian, how do I know that you are, and she doesn't do the FaceTime component, she's only comfortable right now to do the phone session, right?
So you only
And
do the phone sessions with her?
only phone sessions. Like
Oh,
I've offered, to do the screen, like your Doxy or any of these HIPAA-based
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
video screen time, right? And she's not been very open to it. But last week she said, how do I know that when you're in session that you're not doing something else at home? And I think that there's a trust factor that comes with this technology. Whether it's face to face, I think this gives a better. And what's really interesting is that I I have to be in a framework of therapy, so I'm sitting here and having a session, right? But the patient
Mm-hmm.
is always doing stuff at home, whether she's carrying, whatever. And so this projection, right, that comes.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
during this
Mm-hmm.
time where, depending on the technology, I think screen time like this, there's a bit more connectedness than the telephone. And
Well,
so interesting in
right.
how telephone, at least when I was growing up, right, was a way to connect with friends and all, and you could sitting
Mm-hmm.
down and talking. But now, telephone, because you can use, Bluetooth and all that,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a
Mm-hmm.
multitasking thing instead of a connecting
Well,
thing.
I think, and you said it right. So I don't have, do I have, yes. So I have a client who is phone too, and she's not, I've had her for a while, and she only does phone. She's not open towards the face. And maybe some of it has to do with age, now that I'm thinking about it, because she is Um, she is, an older
Yeah.
individual. Um, but I'm also what's kind of coming up to me, which is so interesting, is we're seeing each other, right? So we're seeing it's the part of almost more intimacy behind it. I don't know if that's the right word because we're seeing what our homes look like, right? So, um, we're talking about what significance of communicating today, right? And
Yeah.
how important it is, but it's how we communicate. And I
Yeah, because
think
I
the
have teenagers.
visual,
Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the visual side of it is so important. Communication through phone is one thing, and maybe back in the day it was great because we never were exposed to the video. We don't know what it looked like to speak to someone over video.
Yeah,
Now,
it's been my experience too. I never used FaceTime or whatever until I had, you know,
until
until
this
the
pandemic, really,
pandemic, and
if you
then
think
like,
about
wait,
it.
I can use, even though I've had an iPhone forever, but
Yes, I was so excited when I figured out how to work Zoom. I was so
I still have
excited
to
telling
learn it.
I was telling my clients I finally get this to work. But what I was going to say, the part of how important communication is, or even how not just important how we communicate, but what we see. And the reason why I say this, I had a conversation with, was it a mom? It was a nurse yesterday, and we were talking about masks. We're talking, and I'm looking at her mask, and I forget what it says. Don't panic. It was like one of those comic masks. Great. I had like a general one. And we're talking and we're saying, I don't know what your facial expression behind the mask is. So then I told her, I might be getting Isabel one of those see-through masks where you can see the lips. But then of course there's worries in there too because they're made out of plastic or whatever it is. And kids, what do? They lick their masks, they play with them. So I don't know how I feel
Yeah.
about it, but the fact of how important not just the visual, how important not just the talking is, but the visual that comes with it. And I think this is why we're doing.
It's so interesting because yesterday I had to go to a donation place, and the man was trying to clarify with me. I was having a mess, and I was smiling, but I would assume that a person can, you can tell a smiling eyes, but what he was getting upset with me. I was like, oh my God, he's totally not hearing or seeing my visual that I'm smiling and asking. So you don't take reference books, but these are not, you don't take textbooks, but they only take recipe books or children common fiction, non-fiction. And I was trying to verify, like, but these are not really textbooks. And he's like, I said, I was like, oh, well, I'm sorry, but so our visual cues are lost also. A lot of our, there's a saying, right? Like smile with your eyes, but I'm
Yeah.
smiling and
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
connect with my eyes and it's not connecting.
Yes, I did. That's so interesting that you're talking about it because I did the podcast.
Hmm.
I think it was like one of the other podcast sessions that I did focused on what are the masks really causing now. So obviously we have to wear them, but with what you just said, and I did almost like a test with my daughter. We went shopping, and I said to her, Isabel, am I smiling? And I smiled,
Yeah.
and her response was yes, because I see your eyes what is it, slanted or going a certain way.
Yeah.
And I asked her the same thing. She was wearing a mask, and I said, can you show me if you're mad? And you could see it in her
Yeah.
eyes. But it's so interesting, right, with what you're saying. Hence what we're talking about. How important, how significant is human interaction, connecting, and how we connect today. And I think it's more about the visual. So we're talking, but I think we are becoming more observant with how we're seeing each other.
Yeah, and I think we
Kind of
might be
punch each other
losing touch
faces.
with our listening. And that is so important in communication because even in couples therapy, right? Active listening. Are you hearing me? Do you listen? Do you hear me? And
Mm-hmm.
during Freud's time or any of the analytical approaches, especially if there's, sticking to some of the traditional methods, Freud said behind the patient. So for
Mm-hmm.
those skills, right,
Mm-hmm.
there's hearing for pauses, hearing for inflection, choice of words, being in tune is really important, and that there is value in that. In couples or with our children when we're at home or in an office, when we're doing stuff and we're kind of communicating, is the message coming across as intended?
Mm-hmm.
There's a dependence on visual, and that's not wrong, but then if we do have a mask on, do we still integrate our observational skills and our listening to babies? I mean, our observation skills are supposed to be most developed because the first, 18 months, there's no verbal, right? It's basically crying and all that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so as babies, their observational skills of what makes a parent happy and unhappy
Yes.
is
And now they're
developed.
seeing the mask and they're not quite sure how to react. Maybe at home it's different because we're not wearing masks, with our kids. But when we take them outside, and I just had this another conversation with someone yesterday, taking a child, a baby, to pediatrician or doctors, and all they're seeing is masks. It's how afraid they become because at home they're not seeing it. So it's almost like a different, it's fear, worry for them. I don't know.
Although people are very adaptable and adjustable.
Mm-hmm. But another thing, right, the part of communicating is now that we're working remotely, and yes, we're seeing our clients through this. We're doing this today because it's Zoom and we're not in the office. But once we go back to the office, what do we do? We're wearing masks, right? Because that's our protocol, right? So we follow the rules of wearing the masks and social distancing. Where is it that we put our chairs? But what I'm hearing is the part of clients saying, and you said this too, how do I know what is going on behind this mask? So now, what significance of communicating is being able to express that, right? With what fantasies come up as to what I'm doing behind this mask. What is it that you don't like about it? So I think it's encouraging the clients to be a lot more in tune with their thoughts and be able to express these feelings because they're significant, right? They're important.
So interesting because even the word mask, right, is the old term of persona, the mask we wear. And now we have a mask over the mask we wear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like a double layer.
Double. Right, because or the hats we wear in a sense, right? Like there is face to face or in person in the office. I think that it encourages, or or maybe depending on the vulnerability that a client has the courage to attend to at that time, allows for them to express or show up in some of the more vulnerable or authentic masks. Some of their fears, their anxieties, and what does a mask do to that expression if we're not reading it from the perspective of transference and counter-transference, right? The energy.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I was going to say there's a lot of thoughts that come with wearing masks, right? Because if we're going back to before COVID, to see someone in a mask would have made us feel a different, to see. And I remember I did this. So we're going back to March, right? When we were all told to isolate, separate, not interact so much. And then I remember stepping out of the house and I'm seeing people wearing a mask. And it's almost like, that looks really weird. That looks odd. And it's almost like we were judging, stereotyping it, right? And now it's almost the opposite. If you're not wearing a mask, you're doing exactly what you did back then, right? So it is such a norm for many of us, where, and I remember catching myself doing it, is going back to the smiling, right? The interacting. Should I even smile? Who's going to know if I'm smiling? And I think one time when we were talking, not today, but another time, if I say hi lightly, is someone going to hear me, right? I think we were talking about it too, is just, we're passing a stranger or a store and we're smiling. And I remember catching myself like, is there a point to smiling?
It's so interesting. I did that yesterday and the person didn't even make eye contact with me. I'm trying to so everyone's doing their own thing. So if they don't have an eye contact, I mean, as a cue, then I was smile. I guess I was smile was part of the cue for our peripheral vision. Oh, someone's smiling or someone's looking. And
Yeah.
then we just, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Talk about all our sensories and that has become either used or underused or not attended to in our communication. We really have to be conscious about connecting.
Uh-huh. And you know what? I'm smiling as you were saying this because I'm thinking senses, right? So the part of hearing,
Yeah.
hearing what someone's saying. Okay, we can be in tune to it, I guess, maybe more so. The part of seeing, probably, I feel like it's more enhanced. Actually, both seeing and hearing. But then I laugh because I'm thinking sense of smell and sense of taste. It's covered. So now I kind of can't smell, if someone has an odor. Or maybe not even, maybe someone's baking something good, regardless whether it's a pleasant smell or not. I can't necessarily smell it with a mask. So maybe there's a benefit to it. And then, of course, or smelling my own, right? Because I'm wearing a mask. So what is, what I eat or whatnot. And then the part of taste, I
Yeah.
guess nobody doesn't know what I'm tasting or vice versa. So once again, this five senses are so important, right? And two of them are almost taken away. And the fifth one being, the importance of touch and
Touch.
which
We don't even hug.
hello,
Yeah.
yeah, we, I know we're recording this today, but we met, in the office Saturday and a few days ago, and it's almost like I want to hug you, but
And
we're
if you
hugging
think
in
of people's love
air.
languages, right? You
Yes,
know,
yes.
and some and for there are lots of people where their part of their love language is physical touch,
Mm-hmm.
and so part of their expression or what their needs are unmet.
And also, I've realized that certain individuals whose love language was not touch is almost like touch right now because they're longing to. I have a client who didn't like hugs, was not a hugger. It felt awkward and weird. And now it's almost like the opposite because they're able to see their parents and loved ones. They're longing for the hug. So I almost wonder if, once again, because of what's going on, the significance of communication, but how we communicate even through physical touch, how for some people it is difficult. Yes, for those where love language is touch and it's so important and maybe the difficulties there, but also for those whose love language touch was never there and now it is.
It's wonderful when when it can become a benefit or it can be an opportunity for growth for those who touch wasn't very important.
Mm-hmm.
Now it is, right? That's awesome.
But that kind of goes back into, I'm thinking,
Mm-hmm.
like so infantile, the part of being held as a baby.
The holding experience. It's our safe space. It's our transitional space. Safe holding allows us from our dominant and primary world to now exist and adjust to the external world out there, right? The holding experience,
Mm-hmm.
the safe space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and do people have the ability to hold themselves and keep themselves space from the perspective of their inner dialogue as well? Their
Yes, right.
physical
With
voice or their cerebral.
mm-hmm. And I don't know about yourself. I think I know because we've been in business for for
Yeah,
such a long time,
yeah.
quite some time. Is I have certain clients who like to hug.
Mhm.
It's just the way cultural maybe, right? A lot of other factors that contribute to it. That that's the way that they say hello. It's not just hello. So I almost wonder now how it's going back to work to remotely to be in our offices with our clients. And how do we now communicate or not communicate whether we hug or not? And what emotions are going to come up with that?
I've noticed that I've learned with sometimes there are those who understand it, and then there's one or two who want that right, and so I've been able to do that. But from the perspective, at least from my upbringing or my Asian background, had already been, therapeutic, right? That it has to be a therapeutic touch in the sense, right? And that's always sometimes our conflict, when we think about cultural diversity, right?
Yeah.
What is the ethical thing to do here, and what is, no
Yeah.
harm type
Yeah.
assessment. And I think the bowing has helped. And now with the mask, I find myself putting my hand to my heart, like, as a way, even on the screen, because I'm like, like I want to connect, but I can't, so I just have to do this. I
Yeah.
wish you well, in
Yeah.
a sense. Yeah, I think we're learning in some sense also other forms of expression that hopefully connect and transfer or communicate the intent and the affection in our non-verbal or in our non-physical expressions.
So I guess in some ways, because of COVID, we have taken a step back to observe how we communicate, or how much more important communication is, but it's also the part of what type of communication do we have with one
Yeah,
another.
absolutely. And I think it's an opportunity for us to learn like some really empathetic, active listening, right? To kind of listen to the message versus the words. Because in couples as well, even in friends, different terms have different meaning depending on one's culture. In Portuguese, rapariga, it means girl, but in Brazilian, it means like woman of the street. But little girl, but it can
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
and even in Asia, like in Indonesia and Malaysia, we all speak a common language, but there are different words that are used for different situations.
But see,
So,
once again, now we're going back to how important it is how we communicate, but too, for us as professionals to be aware of the cultural, right? Our backgrounds. I think it's one thing to say, if we're all coming from one group of, what am I trying to say? Cultural upbringing versus we are working with so much diversity that the part of communication, once again, we follow our policies, because we have to, right? Our standards and what we need to do, what's ethical, but at the same time, there's people, and the ability to care, to love, to express, to talk is so important.
to be human, to be humane,
Yeah.
and to kind of remember that we are all citizens of the world.
Mm-hmm.
We are all connected, that we all belong to the same thread. Right?
And you said human, right? Or all human. Is how much did we long to almost connect when COVID first started? We were under so much anxiety, and we still are, but so much anxiety, depression hitting afterwards, right? After a period of time when I guess we didn't necessarily, when we were told it's just going to be short, 2-3 weeks, and then it turned into months and still going, that we dealt with so much anxiety because we needed to separate, isolate. We couldn't see our grandparents. I mean, there's families. I have clients who have not seen their families physically since March. We are in September almost. That's a long time. And the part of depression that has kind of set in there, the part of, what do I do? Because the fear is so intensified. I mean, mentally, it's exhausting. Not for me, but just in general. I can't imagine myself, whether it's not seeing you physically. I was so excited when I saw you, when I saw some of my colleagues or friends finally after some time, because I've realized how important that is.
Yeah.
There's a difference between isolating and separating, and maybe for some of us, it felt good in the moment, right? I'm going to work from home. This is going to be great. After a while, we realized it wasn't, because of how much we actually wanted to communicate with others. And this is where what Zoom came in. You name it, all these video platforms where we then started calling our friends, right? Video calling them just so we can see them, but it didn't feel the same way. We were able to see, I'm able to see you, but I am fully not able to see you because there's almost a lack of that physical presence. And I think that's also, once again, how important that is. Yeah.
Yeah. Proximity is what makes dating and mating possible. My graduate thesis, and this was 1999, and that time 98, 99 essentially, right? Uh, my paper was the effects of the internet and on social isolation, because at that time when I lived on campus,
Mm,
computer, I had to go to a computer lab to type my paper.
yes.
And I thought if I went after, like at night, I would be able to get a computer. But because AOL and all the chat rooms had begun at that time, every student was using a computer and not doing homework.
For the
And,
chat
and so
room.
that's
I
how
remember
my
that.
thesis came out, right. And so how we use the vehicle and what we use the internet for, right? And my paper kind of showed at that time, my research, that there was a significance that people that the use of the internet, even though it was meant to connect, there was an increase in social isolation. And I think in the recent
Yes.
years, it has
Yes.
been a concern for a lot of parents where their children were with video games and they would be
Yes.
talking to people and
Yes.
why aren't you out playing? But maybe they did feel connected in some sense, whatever their social distancing. And I think we are experiencing that also, like how do we integrate? Because there is a physical need for relationships to happen.
And you know
Dating,
what?
I think,
Like,
has become an issue.
yes, especially with COVID. Yeah. Uh-huh. Because
And
we're
people have
unable.
created Match.com's ad
Yeah.
business, very clever.
It became a challenge, but at the same time, I feel like, because I had just do with some clients, is you now have to really get to know yourself instead of just jumping into physically, because there's sex, everything else that comes in with dating right away nowadays, right? So
Yeah.
now it's almost forcing people to connect through these dating websites, but to actually commit towards conversations and getting to know each other. Once again, how important that conversation is to get to know ourselves. I almost want to say, I wonder how many marriages are going to be post pandemic, not to mention the divorces, but
Yeah. Who knows, right? For some, it will be a divorce, and others for them to be interrupted and repair.
Yes. But like you're also saying, right? The part of, so I remember, I'm sure both of us remember this, growing up, we didn't have computers. We didn't have, I had 2 channels on my television, and I remember only watching a cartoon from 7 to 7:30 or 7:30 to 8, and that was it. And that's only if I wanted to, because I was outside climbing trees or running in the grass, playing in the sandbox, and that was so great. That was my experience, and that's what I cherish today. Kids, they're more exposed to video games, you said, right? The Facebook, all these social platforms, which once again, there could be a benefit and not necessarily a benefit to it, but it's the way they remember, and they will remember this, the way they communicate. Yes, you're right. They are communicating, but I also think that flipping it to COVID, how much they don't want this that much. They're part of communicating through, because now they're forced. Before it was more instant gratification. I'm going to do this. This is great. Forget homework. Now it's forced. And because it's forced, just like we go back to everything that's forced upon us, we don't like it. So now
there's something to be said about, like, video games or whatever being a way as an outlet, but now we're on it so much
that we don't want it. And now they're longing to connect, right? And one of the bigger, from what I'm hearing, I don't know what your thoughts on it too, are of how important communication is for kids, teenagers, the ability to interact. I read a few articles where the teenagers are having a difficult time. I think the little ones, like my daughter's age, 6, it's difficult, but because it's such a young age, they can adjust. Right? They can adjust. The teenagers, naturally, they are in a what stage? The interacting stage. They want to socialize. They don't want to do nothing with parents. Forget parents. Like, who are you?
Individuation and their confirmation, exactly.
Yes. And they're having
Yeah.
a difficult time with that because whether it's they're not allowed, everybody has their own reservations. And then also the 20 and 30-year-olds. Why is that? Because we're involved in so many different activities outside socially, right? So from what I'm hearing is once again of how important the socializing is because of COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think socializing, because COVID has has inspired a higher consciousness on the importance of socializing?
That it has inspired.
An awareness, an increased awareness on the importance or the significance of socializing?
I think it does and it doesn't. I
Mm,
think it does in a sense because once again, we have been almost forced or confined to our spaces, right? So for those of us, once again, I think it has to do with personalities, those that are more extroverted, introverted maybe, is some of us wanting to long to socialize, which I think statistically, I don't know, the bigger number would be for those that long to socialize, wanting to step out. But I think there's also the opposite, the appreciation that maybe when, for those of us who maybe socialize so much or need to be socializing so much, where we find almost gratitude of not socializing and actually connecting with those that we are at home with. So I think there's, pros and cons to both sides.
yeah, yeah. And I think we've got to be conscious about how we use our interaction. That I think there has to be some awareness for meaningful interaction that attends to some of our unmet needs, our emotional
Mm-hmm.
needs, our
Mm-hmm.
stress needs.
Right.
Um,
And feelings, right? I mean, how we interact, how we socialize, how we speak is, I know for myself, I don't know about you, but I know for myself is I am not going to a huge, massive party to socialize just because I want to socialize. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check in with myself. What is it that I want to do that still feels great, but still allows me to socialize? So once again, right, with how we choose to look at it, that at the same time can fulfill us.
that's so interesting because I think now, there is like online communal meditation and communal yoga. And but you know what I miss? I used to love clubbing. I love music and I love dancing.
You
That's
still do. You
oh,
still love it.
so I still dancing at
You still
home,
dance
like
and
just
sing.
but I just love the days when we had those big clubs and there was loud music and I would just get into this trance and it would be such a
Mm,
great workout and a great release and even though I'm what we call an intimate extrovert, and even though there's a large crowd, I would have my circle of friends that would all be dancing together and like whatever. But that is one communal activity that I do miss. I'm not a person who likes to socialize with a lot of people, but with just being around people and we have a common interest and a dance,
yeah, yeah.
wow.
Right.
Um,
So you had what you missed, right? And how, what is it that you can do today to still have it fulfilled, right? It's almost
and
like we have to find more creative ways to do it.
yes, yes, more creative ways. Too bad I don't have the clubbing sound system or the strobe lights to inspire.
They have now these colorful lights. You could get them.
You know what I do? In my run, when I go running,
Yeah.
I just do a quick run every day, and so I kind of listen to this music and I have my earphones, and that's sort of my experience to get in touch. Like I love my body loves me. To just be in tune with
Mm-hmm.
our heart and mind and our internal dialogue, and music
Mm-hmm.
that really pumps that up. You know.
It gives us extra energy.
And capoeira, I love capoeira, and there's something to be said when you're exercising with a bunch of people. Some of the
Yes.
routines and playing and all that is just yeah, I
But
do
that's
miss
what,
it.
I mean, yeah, you're right. Look what you just said, right? The part of doing capoeira or just dancing, and not just by yourself, but someone else involved, because I feel like what I've heard is doing something. I think it depends on activities. I don't want to do this by myself. I want to do this with someone else. And I think a lot of these places, yoga, and, I guess capoeiras too, they're doing all these activities outside. Why? It's because it goes back to how significant, that interaction is, that communication. We feel different when we are around others than we are by ourselves. Maybe it's not as energizing or motivating to do something by yourself versus with others who are on the same page.
Yeah, we're humans. There is the intimacy component, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is the social sense of belonging that is so important. Especially for self-preservation, and then for a culture to happen, for a community to happen, for a country to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
We belong to a group because we could die. There's an interdependence, a healthy interdependence that comes with belonging to a community.
Yeah.
Because we can't do it all on our own, and now I guess we're evolved enough that we can do that and still belong. But I guess the fear is that the isolation or the separation, what does that do to our preservation, our mindset, our sense of intimacy, the duality that comes from intimate relationships?
And I think
our time is almost up, but
yes, it is. I was going to say, I guess, in conclusion, is I think only with time it will show of how this COVID has affected us in the sense of what we truly want, how we want to connect or don't want to connect. What is it that we're going to be more afraid of or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in closing, I would think that how do we close the gap of ambivalence instead of our circumstances pulling us apart? How do we develop and strengthen our character strengths that our destiny or our sense of being is not defined so much by the circumstance, but the power of adaptability and our character strength and our virtues and our values become a very big part of what we are focused on, so that it helps us grow and integrate and become more of our best selves.
Well, it's challenging our human existence, right? I'm seeing you through Zoom, but I want to see you in person. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad that we're using Zoom as a way to have these like meaningful conversations. This can benefit from it.
And there will be more to come.
Happiness.
Joy.
So I'm going to get ready for my next session. And
okay.
I'm going to go dance a little bit.
And I'm going to socially interact with a friend. I needed fulfillment for a little bit.
Yes,
we're both going to fulfill our needs. I'm going to socially interact with someone, and you're going to dance.
So take good care.
Okay, you too.
We'll speak
Take
soon.
care. Yes.
Ciao.
Ciao.